Project CONDOR was initiated on explicit authorization from the Director of Central Intelligence, following a preliminary analysis by the National Reconnaissance Office of persistent, inexplicable anomalies detected by the Lacrosse 5 satellite platform over a remote sector of the East Antarctic ice sheet. Initial data suggested a significant subsurface energy or magnetic disturbance, inconsistent with known geological activity or established scientific installations in the region. The area in question, situated hundreds of kilometers from any permanent research station and characterized by extreme ice thickness, presented both a significant logistical challenge and an intelligence vacuum. The potential implications, ranging from clandestine foreign activity leveraging unknown natural phenomena to a unique and potentially exploitable geophysical event, necessitated a covert assessment. A highly compartmentalized planning group, operating under the codename ICEWORM, was convened at Langley. Composed of representatives from the Directorate of Science and Technology, the Directorate of Operations, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, NGA, and discrete liaisons from the National Science Foundation, NSF, and the U.S. Antarctic Program, USAP. The latter two providing crucial, deniable logistical and environmental expertise. The group's mandate was clear: evaluate the anomaly without attracting attention, determine its nature and origin, and assess any strategic significance. The sheer scale of the Antarctic environment and the limited operational window during the austral summer demanded innovative approaches. Traditional intelligence methods were impractical. Direct observation and data collection on the ground were essential. This required deploying a small, highly specialized team capable of operating autonomously in one of the world's most hostile environments, under a robust, multi-layered cover story. The planning phase quickly highlighted the unprecedented complexity. Simply inserting personnel and equipment capable of penetrating potentially kilometers of ice covertly was deemed near impossible. The required heavy drilling or seismic equipment would be difficult to transport and conceal. Furthermore, any sustained activity would inevitably register on monitoring networks or potentially be observed by foreign reconnaissance assets, despite the remoteness. Initial proposals ranged from airdropping a minimal team for a rapid surface survey, dismissed as insufficient for investigating a subsurface anomaly, to a large-scale scientific expedition cover that would be plausible but difficult to fully control and deniable if compromised. The ICEWORM group eventually converged on a hybrid approach, leveraging existing NSF logistical pathways under a fabricated research project focused on deep ice core sampling for climate history, a standard if ambitious scientific pursuit. A small modified team would be embedded within a seemingly legitimate privately contracted support operation. The research would be a front for deploying advanced, low-signature geophysical sensors and potentially a specialized, man-portable subsurface probe developed specifically for this mission. The target area, codenamed Sector 7G, was near a geologically interesting but previously unstudied subglacial mountain range, providing a plausible scientific justification for airborne surveys and localized activity. Personnel selection was rigorous, prioritizing individuals with demonstrable expertise in polar operations, remote sensing, glaciology, and engineering, alongside experienced field operatives trained in clandestine procedures and survival. The team, designated Element Epsilon, consisted of 12 individuals, a blend of technical specialists and security operations personnel, carefully vetted not only for skills, but also for psychological resilience under extreme isolation and pressure. Each member was assigned a specific role within the fabricated research project, complete with plausible scientific or technical backgrounds. The cover story detailed a study of deep ice characteristics near a newly identified subglacial topographic feature, requiring seismic reflection surveys, gravity measurements, and shallow ice coring. Activities consistent with legitimate polar research but adaptable to conceal the true objectives. Equipment procurement involved acquiring commercial off-the-shelf items where possible to avoid drawing attention, while sensitive proprietary sensors and the subsurface probe were developed or adapted in secure facilities and integrated into standard-looking research packages. Financial transactions were routed through shell corporations and obscured within larger contracts for polar logistical support services. The tight operational window of the austral summer, typically spanning from late November to early February, dictated an aggressive timeline. Failure to complete the mission and extract before the harsh winter set in would have catastrophic consequences. Every detail, from power generation in extreme cold to waste disposal that left no trace, had to be meticulously planned. The potential for encountering unexpected environmental conditions, katabatic winds exceeding 100 knots, sudden whiteouts, crevasse fields hidden under fresh snow, added layers of uncertainty. Medical preparedness was paramount, as evacuation from Sector 7G would be a multi-day, high-risk undertaking even in optimal conditions. A small, prefabricated habitat module, designed for rapid deployment and minimal footprint, was commissioned, along with specialized Antarctic transport vehicles, modified snowcats and snowmobiles. Communication protocols were established using burst transmissions and encrypted satellite links, minimizing airtime to reduce intercept risk. The team underwent intensive cold weather survival training in Alaska and northern Canada, coupled with refresher courses in signals intelligence countermeasures and field improvisation. Psychological evaluations were ongoing, monitoring cohesion and individual stress levels. The operational plan outlined a phased deployment: air transport to the primary staging base, e.g. the McMurdo Station, or a foreign base acting as a transshipment point under contractual agreement, followed by a long-range flight via ski-equipped LC-130 aircraft to a pre-selected landing site within several hundred kilometers of Sector 7G. From there, the team and their equipment would traverse overland to the specific anomaly coordinates using snowcats. The overland journey itself was estimated to take several days to a week, depending on terrain and weather. Setting up the habitat module, deploying sensors, conducting surveys, and operating the subsurface probe would require the bulk of the limited time on the ice. Data collection would be the priority, with minimal time allocated for analysis in the field. Samples, if any were retrieved by the probe, would be secured for transport and analysis back in the United States. Extraction would reverse the process, aiming for minimal disruption and leaving no discernible trace of non-standard activity. The budget allocated reflected the extreme costs of operating in Antarctica, covering specialized logistics, equipment development, personnel costs, and contingencies for weather delays or emergencies. The project remained within a tightly controlled compartment, with access granted only on a strict need-to-know basis, even within the CIA. Briefings for the director were limited to verbal updates, with minimal documentation generated. The inherent risks were acknowledged: loss of personnel, compromise of the mission resulting in diplomatic incidents or exposure of sensitive capabilities, and the possibility that the anomaly was a natural phenomenon of no strategic value, rendering the entire costly and risky endeavor moot. Despite these risks, the potential implications of the Lacrosse 5 data, specifically the unique signature of the energy magnetic disturbance, unlike anything previously catalogued, compelled the agency to proceed. The operational window was closing. Preparation had to be completed by late November for deployment. The initial deployment phase proceeded with textbook precision, a testament to the meticulous planning undertaken by the ICEWORM group. Element Epsilon, integrated seamlessly into the fabricated logistical chain, traveled first via standard commercial air to Punta Arenas, Chile. Here, They transitioned to a chartered vessel ostensibly carrying specialized equipment for polar research, which was, in fact, heavily reinforced and provisioned for extended independent operation in pack ice. The voyage south through the Drake Passage was notoriously rough, but uneventful from a security perspective. Communications were strictly limited, relying on pre-arranged, secure burst transmissions at irregular intervals. The ship, the MV Arctic Prowler, a privately owned ice-strengthened cargo vessel under temporary charter to a shell corporation, navigated the treacherous waters and ice flows with the assistance of satellite ice charts and onboard radar. The remoteness of the route provided the first layer of isolation. Upon reaching the edge of the permanent ice shelf, the team transferred to a waiting ski-equipped LC-130 Hercules aircraft, painted and marked to resemble a standard polar research support plane, though internally modified with additional fuel tanks and specialized cargo handling systems. The transfer was conducted swiftly at a pre-arranged rendezvous point under cover of low visibility and utilizing strict radio silence protocols. The long-range flight inland was arduous, spanning several hours over an unbroken expanse of white. Navigation relied on inertial guidance systems, GPS, when satellite coverage allowed, and pre-flight analysis of terrain radar data. The target landing site, designated LZ Raven, was selected based on satellite imagery indicating a relatively flat, crevasse-free area of blue ice or compacted firn, suitable for ski landings. The approach was low and fast, minimizing the aircraft's time as a potential radar contact. The landing itself on the hard ice was jarring, but successful. LZ Raven was located approximately 200 kilometers from the precise coordinates of the observed anomaly in Sector 7G, a distance deemed sufficient to prevent immediate association between the aircraft's presence and the target area, while still allowing for a multi-day overland traverse. Unloading the equipment and supplies proceeded rapidly. The prefabricated habitat module, disassembled into manageable sections, along with the 2 modified snowcats, fuel bladders, generator systems, scientific equipment, and several months' worth of supplies, were offloaded onto the ice. The LC-130 remained on the ground only long enough for the unloading and a final systems check before taking off again, leaving Element Epsilon utterly alone in the vastness. The sense of isolation was profound, immediate, and absolute. The silence was broken only by the wind and the distant creak of the ice. Temperatures hovered around 30 degrees Celsius, a relatively mild figure for Antarctica, but still demanding constant vigilance against frostbite and hypothermia. The initial task was establishing the Forward Operating Base, FOB, christened Outpost Zero. This involved assembling the habitat module, a process that required several hours of strenuous physical labor in the biting cold. The module, once assembled, provided a small, heated, and relatively comfortable living and working space. A perimeter was established, marked by flags and incorporating strategically placed sensor tripwires, primarily for detecting any unusual activity, not necessarily human, but also monitoring ice movement or crevasse formation near the camp. Setting up the communication array was critical, ensuring a link back to headquarters via the secure satellite uplink. Power was provided by a diesel generator, carefully insulated to minimize noise and fuel consumption, with a secondary backup system. The first few days at Outpost Zero were dedicated to acclimatization, equipment testing, and preparing for the overland traverse to Sector 7G. The Snowcats, robust tracked vehicles modified with reinforced chassis, extra insulation and specialized cargo sleds, were vital. Each was loaded with survey equipment, fuel for the journey, emergency supplies, and components of the subsurface probe. Navigation across the featureless ice sheet relied on differential GPS and preloaded satellite imagery and elevation data. Crevasse detection gear, including ground-penetrating radar and visual inspection techniques, was a constant necessity. The traverse began slowly, the snowcats churning through the soft surface snow and navigating areas of hard, wind-scoured ice. Visibility could change in moments, from dazzling sunlight reflecting off the snow to complete whiteouts where the horizon vanished and disorientation was total. Progress was measured in kilometers per hour, a painstaking crawl across an infinite landscape. The target area, Sector 7G, was not visible. It existed only as a point on their GPS receivers and a data set back at Langley. As they moved closer, airborne magnetic and gravity surveys conducted during initial reconnaissance flights by the LC-130 on its approach runs confirmed the general location and intensity of the anomaly, helping refine the precise target coordinates for ground investigation. The readings were indeed unusual, exhibiting a complex multipolar magnetic signature and a localized gravity gradient that didn't align with expected subglacial topography based on existing data. These preliminary findings reinforced the importance of the mission, validating the risk and expense. The environmental challenges were relentless. Equipment designed for extreme cold still suffered failures. Lubricants thickened, batteries lost charge rapidly, and delicate electronics were susceptible to condensation if not managed carefully. Physical labor in heavy cold weather gear was exhausting. The psychological toll of constant vigilance, isolation, and the stark, unchanging environment began to manifest in subtle ways. Increased irritability, difficulty sleeping, and the oppressive weight of knowing they were utterly dependent on their equipment and each other in a place where even minor mistakes could be fatal. Despite this, the team maintained discipline and focus, driven by the understanding of the mission's importance, however ill-defined its ultimate objective might be. The traverse continued, the snowcats leaving faint tracks that would soon be erased by the wind. Every hour of travel brought them closer to the source of the inexplicable signals that had drawn them to this remote, frozen corner of the world. The landscape offered no clues, just endless white stretching to a pale sky. The true nature of the anomaly remained a complete unknown, buried deep beneath the ice, waiting to be uncovered. The overland traverse to Sector 7G became a test of endurance against the relentless Antarctic environment. The estimated 200-kilometer journey stretched into 4 grueling days. The terrain, initially appearing flat on satellite imagery, proved to be a subtle undulation of sastrugi, hard, wind-sculpted snow ridges, and hidden soft spots where the snowcats could potentially bog down. Crevasse detection was a constant, nerve-wracking process. Using ground-penetrating radar mounted on a leading snowcat and visual observation, the team navigated a path across the ice sheet, marking suspicious areas and rerouting as necessary. The vastness was disorienting. Without landmarks, spatial perception warped, and the horizon remained an unwavering white line against the sky. The silence was broken only by the roar of the snowcat engines and the wind. Visibility shifted without warning. Brilliant sun reflecting off the snow, necessitating constant use of specialized eyewear to prevent snow blindness, could instantly give way to a thick whiteout where the ground and sky merged into an indistinguishable void. During whiteouts, progress slowed to a crawl, relying solely on GPS and the hope that no unseen obstacle lay directly ahead. Navigation became a matter of trusting instruments explicitly while every instinct screamed caution. The team worked in shifts, maintaining constant watch, monitoring equipment, and managing fuel consumption. Refueling from the bladders carried on the sleds was a cold, difficult process, requiring care to prevent spills in the pristine environment. The The snowcats, though robust, demanded constant maintenance. The extreme cold stressed every component, from tracks and suspension to engine hoses and electrical systems. Minor repairs were performed in the field, often with numb fingers and limited tools, under the glare of headlamps during the perpetual daylight of the Antarctic summer. The psychological effects of the isolation and constant environmental pressure were undeniable. Brief moments of frustration or irritability would surface, quickly suppressed by the shared understanding of their precarious situation and mutual dependence. Team cohesion, fostered during the intensive training, proved essential. They relied on each other for spotting dangers, maintaining morale, and ensuring procedures were followed meticulously, especially regarding safety. Finally, on the afternoon of the fourth day, the GPS coordinates indicated they had reached the approximate center of Sector 7G. There was nothing visually remarkable about the location. It was just another expanse of wind-scoured ice and snow. The anomaly was deep beneath them, completely hidden. Establishing the forward operating base, FOB Delta, near the target coordinates was the immediate priority. Unlike Outpost 0, FOB Delta was designed to be minimal and temporary, primarily a work camp centered around the investigation site. The Habitat module was assembled again, serving as a command center, warm workspace for data analysis, and living quarters. A separate tent was erected to house the generator and fuel supply, positioned downwind and at a safe distance. The primary focus shifted from travel and survival to the technical objective, deploying the sensors and operating the subsurface probe. Geophysical survey equipment was deployed first, a grid of seismic sensors laid out across the ice surface, magnetic anomaly detectors towed behind snowmobiles on slow systematic passes, and a high-resolution gravity meter taking readings at carefully surveyed points. The goal was to precisely map the extent and characteristics of the anomaly from the surface. Initial readings from the deployed sensors began to refine the picture provided by the satellite data. The magnetic anomaly was indeed complex, indicating multiple poles and a geometry inconsistent with simple ferrous deposits. The gravity data showed a distinct positive anomaly, suggesting a significant concentration of mass below the ice. Seismic readings were the most intriguing and difficult to interpret. Standard ice-penetrating radar mapped the ice thickness, confirming depths exceeding 3,000 meters in the central area of Sector 7G. Deeper seismic reflection and refraction techniques yielded ambiguous results. There were strong reflectors far below the ice-rock interface, but their signatures didn't match typical bedrock layers or known subglacial lake characteristics. They suggested a structure or material with unusual density and acoustic properties. As the surface surveys progressed, preparations for operating the specialized subsurface probe began. This probe, designated Project Nightingale, was the culmination of years of classified R&D. It was a thermal electric drill designed to melt slowly through kilometers of ice, carrying a payload of sensors: temperature, pressure, magnetic, gamma ray, acoustic, and a small sampling mechanism. Unlike traditional hot water drills or mechanical drills, Nightingale was designed for stealth and minimal environmental impact. It was powered by a compact radioisotope thermoelectric generator, RTG, providing consistent heat for melting and power for the sensors and communication, eliminating the need for large surface power sources or fuel lines. Its descent speed was slow, measured in meters per hour, meaning reaching depths of several kilometers would take many days. Deploying Nightingale required drilling an initial access hole using a smaller, less sensitive hot water drill. This part of the operation carried the highest risk of leaving a trace, as the meltwater could refreeze and create a noticeable feature if not managed. A shallow sump was dug, and the meltwater was carefully contained or allowed to refreeze within the bore itself, minimizing surface signature. Once the access hole was deep enough to launch Nightingale, the main operation began. The probe was lowered into the water-filled bore, its RTG already activated. The slow descent commenced, monitored by a thin, high-tensile strength cable providing power regulation, minimal needed once the RTG was active, and data transmission. The data stream from Nightingale was sparse, but critical, providing real-time environmental parameters and initial readings from within the ice column. The surface team settled into a routine of monitoring Nightingale's descent, managing power and communications at FOB Delta, and continuing detailed surface surveys to build a comprehensive geophysical map of Sector 7G. The tension mounted with every meter the probe descended. They were now actively investigating the source of the anomaly, but what they would find remained an utter mystery, buried kilometers beneath the ice sheet. The descent of the Nightingale probe was a slow, methodical process, a tense waiting game that consumed days of the precious operational window. The probe, melting its way through the ice at an average rate of about 50-70 meters per day, transmitted data through the umbilical cable back to the monitoring station at FOB Delta. The initial data confirmed the ice thickness estimates and provided detailed temperature and pressure profiles of the ice column. As Nightingale passed through different ice layers, firn, compacted ice, and finally into the deeper, older glacial ice, the sensor readings remained within expected parameters, consistent with the immense pressures and low temperatures found at such depths. However, as the probe neared the estimated depth of the ice-bedrock interface, approximately 300 meters down, according to initial seismic surveys, the readings began to deviate. The magnetic field strength increased significantly, far exceeding typical crustal magnetizations. More intriguingly, the magnetic signature exhibited rapid fluctuations and localized variations unlike anything consistent with standard geological formations. Acoustic sensors registered faint intermittent signals, low-frequency rumbling, or clicks that didn't correlate with known ice cracking or subglacial water flow. The temperature sensor also registered a slight, but measurable, increase beyond the expected geothermal gradient as the probe approached the interface. After 8 days of continuous descent, at a depth of 3,015 meters, the probe's forward progress abruptly halted. Pressure readings spiked momentarily, then stabilized, indicating it had encountered a solid barrier. The temperature continued to rise slightly around the probe head, suggesting the barrier was warmer than the surrounding ice or bedrock. The team at FOB Delta immediately began analyzing the data transmitted from the halted probe. The barrier material was incredibly dense, based on resistance encountered by the probe's melting head. The magnetic readings directly at the point of contact were intense and highly complex, suggesting a structured, non-uniform source. Gamma-ray spectroscopy indicated the presence of unusual isotopic ratios, including elements not typically found concentrated in Antarctic bedrock at these levels. The acoustic sensors, now directly in contact with the barrier, picked up more distinct signals, not random noise, but patterned vibrations or resonances, albeit very faint. This was the core of the anomaly. It wasn't a massive natural formation like a mountain or a subglacial lakebed with unusual properties. It was something localized, dense, and emitting complex magnetic and potentially vibrational energy. But what was it? The data was tantalizingly ambiguous. It didn't scream alien spaceship or ancient city, which was a relief in terms of maintaining the realistic constraint. But it also didn't offer a simple geological explanation. It was anomalous, unidentified. The team discussed the findings intensely via secure link with the ICEWORM analysts back at Langley. Initial theories ranged from a highly unusual meteorite composition to a unique geothermal vent depositing exotic minerals, or even a previously unknown, naturally occurring phenomenon related to fundamental physics at extreme pressures and temperatures. The patterned acoustic signals were the most difficult to reconcile with natural explanations. They hinted at structure, perhaps even internal activity, within the object. The decision was made to activate the sampling mechanism on the Nightingale probe. The probe was equipped with a small coring bit and a sample chamber capable of extracting a few cubic centimeters of material from the barrier it had encountered. This was a high-risk maneuver. Attempting to drill into an unknown dense substance could damage the probe or cause it to become irretrievably stuck. But without a physical sample, definitive identification would be impossible. The command was sent down the cable. The probe's drill activated. For several tense hours, the data stream indicated high torque and slow penetration. The barrier was incredibly hard. Finally, the sensors confirmed the sample chamber had successfully acquired material. The drill was retracted, and the probe systems switched to standby mode, conserving RTG power. The next critical phase was retrieving the probe and the precious sample. Given the depth, simply pulling the probe back up the several kilometers of melt channel was not feasible due to refreezing risks and cable strain. The plan had always been to use the cable as a guide for a secondary, larger recovery system. This system, designated Phoenix, was essentially a larger diameter thermal mechanical drill capable of following Nightingale's path and creating a wider bore to retrieve the smaller probe and its sample. Phoenix was brought online at FOB Delta. It required significantly more power than Nightingale, drawing heavily on the generator and requiring meticulous management of fuel reserves. Its operation was also slower and more complex. Launching Phoenix involved securing its drilling head around the Nightingale cable at the surface and initiating its descent. The process of melting and drilling through the ice, following the faint cable guide, was fraught with potential issues: losing the cable, the bore collapsing, equipment malfunctions. The environmental conditions at FOB Delta remained harsh. A minor equipment failure, a pump seal leaking on one of the snowcats due to the cold, necessitated a day of difficult repairs outside the habitat module. A brief, localized blizzard descended, reducing visibility to zero and halting all external activity for several hours, reminding the team of their vulnerability. Despite the challenges, Phoenix slowly made progress downwards, eating through the kilometers of ice, following the path carved by Nightingale. The data from Nightingale, now deeper in the ice but still transmitting intermittently, provided crucial information about the borehole's integrity and the environment surrounding the target object. The tension was palpable. They were close to obtaining direct evidence of the anomaly, but the process was arduous and subject to the whims of the most extreme environment on Earth. The potential implications of what the Nightingale sample might reveal weighed heavily on the team and the analysts at Langley. Whatever it was unlike anything they had expected to find buried beneath 3 kilometers of Antarctic ice. The ascent of the Phoenix recovery drill, following the cable laid by the Nightingale probe, was as fraught with tension as the initial descent, if not more so. The primary objective was the retrieval of the Nightingale probe itself, specifically the small sample chamber containing material from the unknown subsurface anomaly. The Phoenix drill, larger and more powerful, slowly melted and mechanically cut its way back up the borehole. Its progress was tracked meticulously at FOB Delta, monitoring depth, drill head temperature, power consumption, and the integrity of the borehole. Refreezing of the melt channel was a constant concern. The Phoenix carried heating elements along its length to maintain a molten path around the cable, but localized cold spots or sudden pressure changes could still cause issues. Communications with Langley became more frequent as the anticipated retrieval time neared. The ICEWORM analysts were anxious for the sample. the only potential key to definitively identifying the anomaly. Theoretical models based on Nightingale's sensor data continued to be refined, but without physical evidence, they remained speculative. The patterned acoustic signals remained the most compelling and least explainable finding. Faint, rhythmic pulses detected by Nightingale when it was in contact with the object. These signals were too regular to be random geological noise, but lacked the complexity that would suggest a sophisticated artificial source. One theory posited they could be related to some form of energy transfer or resonance within a naturally occurring but highly unusual crystalline or metallic structure under immense pressure. Another suggested a unique biological process adapted to the extreme subglacial environment, although the density and material composition detected by Nightingale seemed inconsistent with known life forms. On the 7th day of Phoenix's ascent, after covering over 3,000 meters, the telemetry indicated successful docking with the Nightingale probe at the bottom of the bore. The two units were now locked together, and the slower, combined ascent continued. The weight of the cable and the combined probes was significant, requiring careful management of the winching system at the surface. As Phoenix neared the surface, the team at FOB Delta prepared for the retrieval. A small, heated enclosure was set up around the drill head exit point to protect against the biting cold and wind during the sensitive process of extracting the probes. The final meters were brought up slowly. Breaking the surface was a moment of intense anticipation. Encased in a sheath of refrozen ice from the meltwater bore, the Phoenix drill head, with Nightingale secured within it, was carefully maneuvered into the heated enclosure. The ice sheath was melted away using handheld steam lancers, revealing the two connected probes. The Nightingale probe was then meticulously detached from Phoenix. The team member designated as the primary sample handler, a geochemist with extensive experience in handling sensitive materials in contaminated or extreme environments, donned specialized cleanroom gear within the heated enclosure. The sample chamber on Nightingale was designed for secure containment. Using specialized tools, the geochemist accessed the chamber. Inside, secured within a small sealed cylinder, was the sample. A dark, metallic-looking shard, approximately 2 cubic centimeters in size. Visually, it was unremarkable, appearing to be a fragment of dense rock or metal. But its significance was immense. This small piece held the potential answers they had risked everything to obtain. The shard was immediately transferred to a secure, temperature-controlled containment vessel, which was then double-sealed and placed in a shock-proof transport case. Chain of custody protocols, established long in advance, were initiated. The sample was designated Specimen 7G Alpha. With the retrieval complete, the focus shifted entirely to extraction from Sector 7G. Time was pressing. The operational window was beginning to close, with increasingly volatile weather patterns predicted. The habitat module and all equipment had to be packed up, leaving minimal trace. The borehole created by the drills was allowed to refreeze naturally, which would take time but eventually blend back into the surrounding ice surface, leaving only a subtle, near-invisible depression or change in ice structure detectable only with highly specialized equipment. All waste, including grey water and human waste, was carefully collected and sealed for transport off the continent, adhering strictly to Antarctic Treaty environmental protocols. Every piece of equipment, every tent peg, every fuel drum had to be accounted for. The goal was to make it appear as though nothing more than a brief, low-impact scientific survey had taken place, consistent with the cover story. The snowcats were loaded with the packed gear, the critical sample case secured in a vibration-dampened compartment in the lead vehicle. The long return traverse to LZ Raven began. The journey back was faster, retracing their tracks where possible, but still demanding the same vigilance against crevasses and whiteouts. The knowledge that they carried the sample added a layer of urgency and tension. Communications remained restricted, with only brief, coded status updates sent via burst transmission. Upon reaching LZ Raven, the LC-130 was already on approach. Its timing meticulously coordinated based on weather forecasts and the team's progress. The transfer of personnel and equipment back onto the aircraft was executed with maximum speed and efficiency. The Specimen 7G Alpha case was the first item secured aboard. Once everything was loaded and strapped down, the LC-130 powered up its engines. The takeoff from the ice runway was a relief, lifting them away from the austere, unforgiving environment. The long flight north began, carrying Element Epsilon and their unprecedented find towards the analysis phase that would determine its true nature and significance. The physical mission was over, but the core mystery remained, now embodied in the small, dark shard secured deep within the aircraft's cargo hold. The LC-130 flight north from LZ Raven was long and arduous, but marked by a profound sense of relief after the intense isolation and physical demands of operating in Sector 7G. The team, though exhausted, maintained operational security throughout the journey. Conversations were kept low-key and professional, focusing on the technical aspects of the mission and the condition of the retrieved equipment. The Specimen 7G Alpha case remained under constant armed guard. The first leg of the journey terminated at a secure military airfield in Ushuaia, Argentina, a common logistical hub for Antarctic operations. Here, Element Epsilon and their cargo were discreetly transferred to a waiting unmarked C-17 Globemaster III military transport aircraft. The C-17, with its long-range capability and secure communication systems, was the preferred method for transporting high-value assets directly back to the United States. The onward flight was non-stop to Joint Base Andrews, Maryland. Upon arrival, bypassing standard customs and immigration procedures via a secure ramp, the team was met by a waiting contingent from the ICEWORM task force and agency medical personnel. The Specimen 7G Alpha case was immediately transferred to a secure armored vehicle under heavy guard and transported directly to a highly compartmentalized laboratory facility located within a national laboratory complex, already prepared for receiving and analyzing the unique sample. Element Epsilon personnel were taken to a secure debriefing facility. Debriefing was thorough and multifaceted, covering operational procedures, environmental conditions encountered, equipment performance, team dynamics, and most importantly, their observations and perceptions regarding the anomaly and the retrieval process. Psychological evaluations were also conducted, assessing the impact of the mission's stress and isolation. The sample, Specimen 7G Alpha, became the central focus of the subsequent phase. At the secure lab, designated Facility 47, a team of leading material scientists, geochemists, and physicists, all holding TS-SCI clearance with additional compartmented access, began the analysis under strict protocols. The analysis was conducted using a battery of advanced techniques: scanning electron microscopy, X-ray diffraction, mass spectrometry, isotopic analysis, and various forms of spectroscopy. Initial findings were both exciting and perplexing. The shard was composed primarily of an alloy of iron, nickel, and several trace elements, some in concentrations rarely found in terrestrial or meteoritic samples. The crystal structure was highly unusual, exhibiting symmetries not typically observed in naturally occurring materials, especially at such a macroscopic level. Isotopic analysis revealed ratios for certain elements, particularly iron and titanium, that deviated significantly from standard terrestrial and even known meteoritic isotopic signatures. This was a strong indicator that the material did not originate from Earth's crust or from a standard asteroid or meteorite impact. The density of the material was exceptionally high, consistent with initial findings from the Nightingale probe. The acoustic properties tested in the lab were remarkable. The material exhibited resonant frequencies that aligned with the patterned signals detected by Nightingale at depth. Further investigation into the material's properties revealed unusual magnetic behavior. It wasn't simply ferrous. It possessed complex ferromagnetic and possibly even exotic magnetic domain structures that contributed to the powerful and localized magnetic anomaly detected by satellite and surface surveys. The source of the warmth detected by Nightingale remained partially unexplained. While the RTG on the probe contributed some heat, the initial temperature increase suggested the object itself was either warmer than the surrounding icebush bedrock or was generating heat. Laboratory analysis of the sample showed no evidence of ongoing radioactive decay that could explain significant heat generation. This pointed back to the possibility of some form of internal energy transfer or geothermal interaction at depth. However, the material's composition didn't scream advanced technology. There were no visible signs of machining, circuitry, or complex manufactured components under high-resolution microscopy. It appeared, superficially, to be a solid, non-uniform mass. The combination of highly unusual material composition, isotopic ratios, trace elements, anomalous crystal structure, unique magnetic properties, and the resonant acoustic behavior presented a scientific enigma. It was clearly not a standard geological formation or a typical meteorite. The possibility of an extraterrestrial origin became a serious consideration, not in the sense of a spaceship, but perhaps a fragment of something much older from outside the solar system or formed under conditions not found on Earth. The analysis took weeks. The findings were compiled into a highly classified report for the ICEWORM task force and the DCI. The report concluded that specimen 7G alpha was material of unknown origin, exhibiting physical and chemical properties inconsistent with known terrestrial or standard extraterrestrial meteoritic sources. Its nature suggested either a unique, previously unobserved natural phenomenon occurring under extreme subglacial conditions, or a fragment of an object of non-terrestrial origin, possibly predating conventional geological formations. The report carefully avoided definitive conclusions about intelligent design or specific origins, adhering strictly to the empirical evidence. The strategic implications were debated intensely within the compartment. If it was a unique natural phenomenon, understanding it could yield breakthroughs in materials science or physics. If it was non-terrestrial, the potential scientific and technological implications were vast. The fact that it was buried deep beneath the ice provided a natural layer of security, but also raised questions about how it got there. The decision was made to maintain the highest level of secrecy. The findings were deemed too sensitive to be shared with the broader scientific community, even under embargo. The cover story of the deep ice core research was maintained. All data, samples, and equipment related to Project CONDOR were secured in Facility 47. Element Epsilon personnel were subject to strict non-disclosure agreements and monitored. The official record of the mission was limited to generic logistical reports and the fabricated research summary. The true nature of the anomaly in Sector 7G and the findings from specimen 7G alpha remained classified top secret, known only to a tight circle within the intelligence community and government. The mystery wasn't solved in a public sense. It was contained and buried deeper than the ice that had held it. The decision to maintain absolute secrecy regarding the findings from specimen 7G alpha and the Sector 7G anomaly initiated the long-term phase of Project CONDOR, containment and control of information. The report detailing the unusual properties of the sample was circulated only among the highest levels of the ICEWORM task force, the Director of National Intelligence, and a select few individuals within the executive branch with explicit need-to-know clearance. The potential implications were deemed too significant, and the nature of the find too ambiguous yet potentially revolutionary, to risk wider dissemination. Public knowledge could trigger a global scientific frenzy, unwanted attention on a remote strategic location, and potentially reveal sensitive intelligence-gathering capabilities used in the anomaly's detection. Element Epsilon personnel, after their debriefings and medical assessments, were formally rotated out of their temporary assignment. They returned to their previous roles within the agency, DoD, or affiliated scientific institutions, but under enhanced security protocols. Their mission to Antarctica was officially logged under their cover story, mentioning only routine environmental data collection and minor equipment testing. Their real experiences and knowledge were compartmentalized, accessible only through specific security overrides, and they were explicitly forbidden from discussing any details of Sector 7G or the retrieved sample, even amongst themselves. Periodic psychological evaluations were mandated to monitor for stress or compliance issues. The specimen 7G alpha sample was stored in a specialized vault within Facility 47, under constant environmental monitoring and armed guard. Further analysis was restricted to a core team of scientists, expanding on initial findings but proceeding with extreme caution. The focus shifted from initial identification to attempting to replicate the material's properties or understand the processes that could create such a substance with its unique isotopic ratios and crystalline structure. This research became a separate, equally classified sub-project within CONDOR, designated Project Chalice. Initial attempts to synthesize materials with similar properties proved extremely difficult, requiring conditions of pressure and temperature that were hard to replicate even in advanced laboratories, hinting at the extreme environment deep beneath the Antarctic ice, or an extraterrestrial origin. The acoustic resonance properties were particularly puzzling. They suggested an internal structure or energy state unlike anything previously studied. The pattern of the faint signals detected by Nightingale at depth was analyzed extensively, compared against natural seismic activity, man-made signals, and theoretical physics models. While no definitive match was found, some analysts speculated the patterns could represent a form of complex energy transfer or even a rudimentary form of information storage or transmission, a possibility that, while highly speculative, added another layer of mystique and concern. The magnetic anomaly continued to be monitored remotely by satellite. Subtle changes in its signature were noted over time, suggesting either ongoing activity within the object or gradual shifts in the surrounding ice and bedrock influencing the readings. No further ground missions were immediately planned for Sector 7G. The risks and costs were prohibitive, and the initial mission had successfully retrieved a sample for study. Future operations, if deemed necessary, would require even more advanced, lower signature technologies. The fabrication of official records and the maintenance of the cover story required ongoing effort. The charter of the MV Arctic Prowler, the use of the LC-130, masked within a larger pool of aircraft supporting Antarctic logistics, and the activities logged at Outpost Zero and FOB Delta were all reconciled with the deep ice core research narrative. The NSF and USAP liaisons, operating within their compartmentalized access, provided technical advice to ensure the cover story remained plausible within the context of legitimate polar science, while remaining unaware of the true objectives and findings. The financial trail was carefully obscured through layers of contracts and subcontracts with shell corporations, making it nearly impossible to trace back to classified budgets. Intelligence monitoring of foreign activities in Antarctica was heightened, particularly surveillance of research stations and air traffic that might inadvertently detect activity near Sector 7G or LZ Raven. No indications of compromise were detected. Other nations conducted their own research and logistics, unaware of the brief, covert incursion deep into the ice sheet. The psychological well-being of Element Epsilon personnel remained a quiet concern. Living with a secret of this magnitude, having witnessed something profoundly unusual in an extreme environment, carried a burden. Support systems were quietly put in place, allowing them access to psychological counseling under unrelated pretexts if needed, monitoring for any signs of stress or breaches of security. The information gathered about the environmental conditions and operational challenges in Sector 7G also had tangential benefits for classified polar operational planning, improving understanding of equipment performance and human endurance in ultra-cold, remote conditions, though this was a secondary outcome. The true value remained tied to the mystery of specimen 7G alpha. The long-term goal of Project Chalice was to unlock the secrets of the material, its origin, its properties, and potential applications. This was a multi-decade endeavor, recognizing the scientific complexity involved. The possibility remained that the sample was from a natural process, albeit an incredibly rare one, potentially related to unique geological or physical conditions deep under the Antarctic ice. Or it could be something truly non-terrestrial, requiring a fundamental shift in scientific understanding. The secrecy was justified by the uncertainty and the potential strategic implications, whatever the ultimate answer might be. Project CONDOR settled into a state of perpetual vigilance and quiet study. The anomaly in Sector 7G lay undisturbed beneath the ice, its secret partially unveiled by a single small shard, now locked away and studied in the shadows, far from public knowledge or scientific discourse. The title, circulating years later in hushed tones or speculative articles, would only ever touch the surface of a reality far more complex, costly, and ambiguous than any simple conspiracy theory. The scientific investigation into specimen 7G alpha within the confines of Facility 47 proceeded incrementally under Project Chalice. The core team of analysts, augmented by external consultants brought in under the same stringent security protocols, grappled with the material's unique properties. While the initial analyses confirmed the highly unusual isotopic ratios and crystalline structure, further examination focused on the material's response to various stimuli: extreme temperatures, pressures, magnetic fields, and different forms of radiation. Experiments revealed an astonishing resilience to extreme conditions. The shard maintained its structural integrity and exhibited stable magnetic properties even when subjected to pressures exceeding those estimated at the depth of the anomaly and temperatures ranging from near absolute zero to hundreds of degrees Celsius. This suggested either formation under incredibly harsh conditions or an inherent property of the material itself. The complex magnetic domain structure proved particularly challenging to map and understand. Unlike conventional magnets, specimen 7G alpha exhibited localized magnetic poles with varying intensities and orientations at a microscopic level, contributing to the complex macro-level magnetic anomaly detected from orbit. Theories emerged, suggesting the material might be a magnetonic crystal, or possess properties related to exotic states of matter theorized but rarely observed. The resonant acoustic properties also remained a key focus. Detailed spectral analysis of the faint signals recorded by the Nightingale probe, combined with laboratory testing of specimen 7G alpha's vibrational modes, indicated a pattern consistent with specific fundamental frequencies. It wasn't like a musical note or voice, but more akin to the resonant modes of a complex physical system. Some researchers speculated these resonances might be intrinsic to the material's structure under pressure, while others, cautiously, explored the possibility of interactions with external energy sources or even a form of low-level, non-biological activity at depth. The potential for information encoding within these resonances was considered, though the complexity of the patterns was limited, far from anything resembling conventional data transmission. the isotopic ratios continued to be a significant puzzle. Specific ratios of iron, nickel, and chromium, coupled with the presence of rare earth elements in unusual proportions and isotopic mixes, strongly suggested an origin point or formation process outside of typical solar system nucleosynthesis pathways. This didn't definitively prove extraterrestrial origin, as exotic stellar or galactic processes could theoretically create such mixes, but it made a terrestrial or conventional meteoritic origin highly improbable. Parallel efforts were made to cross-reference the measured properties with known geological data, impact crater analysis, and theoretical models of planetary formation and stellar remnants. Nothing provided a complete match. The sample simply didn't fit into established categories. The internal debates within Project Chalice reflected the ambiguity. Was this a natural singularity, a product of unknown deep Earth processes, or a unique event like an impact from an extremely unusual celestial body? Or was it, as the combination of exotic material properties, complex structure, and patterned resonances hinted, something artificial, even if incomprehensibly ancient, or fundamentally different from human technology? The artificial theory was heavily debated due to the lack of obvious manufacturing signs, but proponents argued that an advanced, non-human civilization might create objects using methods or materials beyond current human understanding, perhaps grown or synthesized at an atomic level rather than machined. This remained a highly speculative minority view, but one that couldn't be dismissed out of hand given the evidence. The strategic implications continued to drive the secrecy. If the material's properties, particularly its magnetic behavior or resilience, could be understood and potentially replicated, the technological advantages in fields ranging from energy to materials science to defense could be revolutionary. Allowing this potential knowledge to fall into the hands of rival nations was deemed unacceptable. Furthermore, the sheer scientific paradigm shift that public revelation of such material might trigger was seen as potentially destabilizing. The risk of a global rush to Antarctica to find more, leading to international disputes and potential conflict over a previously apolitical continent, was a significant concern. The cover story was reinforced over time. The fabricated deep ice core research project published carefully curated, non-sensitive data consistent with its cover, focusing on climate history inferred from shallow ice layers. This served to legitimize the research that had provided the cover for Project CONDOR's initial access to the region, ensuring that any future inquiries would hit a wall of seemingly normal scientific activity. Element Epsilon personnel were carefully managed. Those who retired or left the agency were subject to ongoing monitoring. Their families were also discreetly assessed for any signs of unusual knowledge or behavior. The original LC-130 and C-17 aircraft used in the deployment and extraction underwent routine maintenance and eventually were cycled out of service or reassigned, their specific mission history buried within layers of operational logs. Facility 47 became a permanent, secure home for Specimen 7G Alpha and the ongoing research under Project Chalice. The work was slow, painstaking, and yielded more questions than answers. The object buried beneath the ice in Sector 7G remained a source of the complex magnetic anomaly, occasionally resurveyed remotely by satellite to monitor for changes. No further direct contact missions were authorized, deemed too high risk for the potential gain, given that the sample was already undergoing analysis. The enigma endured, a tangible piece of the unknown locked away in a vault, studied by scientists sworn to secrecy, while the vast, empty white expanse of Antarctica held the larger secret, undisturbed. The story of the top secret mission revealed remained, for the world, a phantom, a whisper of something found, deliberately buried again by those who found it. Years turned into decades, Project Chalice continued its slow, grinding analysis of specimen 7G alpha at Facility 47. The initial team of scientists saw members retire and new ones brought in, always under the same extreme levels of compartmentalization and secrecy. The material continued to defy simple explanation. While significant progress was made in understanding its complex crystalline structure and unusual magnetic properties at a theoretical level, attempts to replicate its formation conditions or synthesize similar materials remained largely unsuccessful. The extreme pressures and temperatures required in theoretical models seemed insufficient to produce the observed isotopic ratios or the specific structural anomalies. This reinforced the hypothesis that the material formed under conditions not easily found on Earth, perhaps within a collapsing star, a hypernova remnant, or another exotic cosmic environment. The patterned acoustic resonances also continued to be studied. While no definitive message or complex data encoding was ever identified, the patterns exhibited mathematical properties that some specialists found deeply intriguing, suggesting underlying principles or symmetries not commonly observed in natural physical systems. This kept the artificial hypothesis, however remote, from being entirely discarded. The object itself, buried in Sector 7G, continued to be monitored by satellite. The magnetic anomaly remained stable over long periods, with only minor fluctuations attributed to glacial dynamics or shifts in the Earth's magnetosphere. No new signals emanating from the site were detected beyond the persistent, faint resonances, which required highly sensitive equipment to register. As satellite technology advanced, higher resolution imagery of the surface above Sector 7G became available. These images, combined with advanced ice-penetrating radar from orbit, revealed subtle, long-term changes in the ice sheet surface. Minor depressions or features that could be consistent with very slow flow dynamics around a large, rigid, subsurface mass, or possibly slight melting, refreezing effects caused by the object's interaction with geothermal heat or its own internal activity, however subtle. However, these observations were ambiguous and could be interpreted within the bounds of normal glaciological processes around a subglacial topographic high point. There was no clear evidence of active technology or rapid change. The bureaucratic management of Project CONDOR and Chalice became ingrained within the agency's structure. Annual reviews, highly classified and involving only a handful of senior officials, assessed the progress of research and the continued necessity of secrecy. The immense cost was justified by the potential strategic value of understanding the material's properties and preventing rivals from acquiring such knowledge. Cover stories were updated and maintained as personnel changed and technologies evolved. The original members of Element Epsilon, though still living and healthy, remained under silent observation. Their lives were unremarkable, a testament to the effectiveness of their training and the compartmentalization protocols. Some rose through the ranks in their respective fields, others retired quietly. The mission in Sector 7G became a distant, surreal memory, something they could never discuss but that fundamentally shaped their perspective on the world and the secrets it held. The public sphere remained oblivious. Antarctica continued to be primarily a domain of scientific research and environmental protection under the Antarctic Treaty System. Occasional speculative articles or conspiracy theories about strange findings on the continent would surface online or in fringe publications, some referencing rumored anomalies or classified missions. But these were always vague, lacked specific detail, and were easily dismissed as fiction. The title, "What Did the CIA Really Find in Antarctica? Top Secret Mission Revealed," might appear in such contexts. A sensational headline attached to baseless speculation, ironically close to a truth buried deep under layers of ice and classification. Project Chalice continued its work, pushing the boundaries of materials science and physics in the attempt to understand specimen 7G alpha. There were breakthroughs. better theoretical models for materials with unusual isotopic compositions, advances in measuring properties under extreme conditions, a deeper understanding of complex magnetic structures. But the ultimate questions remained. What was it? How did it get there? And did its origin imply something profound about the universe or life beyond Earth? The lack of a definitive answer allowed the secrecy to persist. It wasn't a downed UFO or an alien body, which might force a level of public acknowledgement or policy change, however fraught. It was a piece of material, an object with properties that defied current understanding, located in an inaccessible place. Its significance lay in its scientific mystery and potential technological implications, not in a clear narrative of contact or discovery. The strategic advantage lay in possessing and studying this enigma in secret, while the rest of the world remained unaware. The object in Sector 7G became a silent, unchanging sentinel, and the small sample in Facility 47 remained its only ambassador, a persistent reminder of something found that was too strange, too potentially significant, and too unexplained to ever be openly acknowledged.